See, I haven't had a permanent in 6 months.
You haven't? I think it looks great. So, what were we talking about before? We were talking about your husband in the war.
Oh, he was in the. He didn't get in right away,
Right.
but he was in over a year, and when his regiment came back,
Right.
he was sick, so he couldn't come back with them.
Uh-huh.
So the captain, whatever you call him, was in with some women over there, and he was terribly diseased.
Right.
And he was ashamed to come home.
Right.
And he didn't come home. He took his life.
Right. Over in France?
Yeah.
Right. And
So my father-in-law was a minister,
right.
and he interceded, and he got him home.
Right.
But he didn't want to. You see, he didn't want to come home because he didn't want the men that he had under him to come home either.
Right.
But that's what happened.
Where did you meet your husband?
What?
Where did you when you first started dating your husband?
Well, he was.
Where was that?
Well, I'll tell you, there was a store up here,
Right.
and he was up there working in the store. It was hard times then, you know. It was around the 20th, around the First World War,
Right.
and he was in the grocery business.
And when do you think that was?
Well, his father was a Methodist minister.
Right.
Well, he lost his hearing. Well, then he couldn't preach, so he retired. Well, and then Edwin was in this. They bought this store up here, and they worked there. Then, in the meantime, he takes the exam for civil service. So he got to be a railway mail clerk. He worked on the B&O for 50 years.
Right.
That sorted mail on the B&O.
And did you start dating him?
Yeah.
When he was.
We started dating.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't start dating till he had a good job.
You didn't want to date him unless he had a good job?
Yeah.
So, what were your dates like? Where did you go?
Well, we went to different places, but we didn't go anything very expensive.
Right.
Because he didn't have any money.
Right. Until he started working on the B&O Railroad.
Yeah, so he worked on the railroad.
So, like, what is one of the dates that you remember?
Well, we went up to Pennsylvania on those trips, you know, that you took in the trains.
Uh-huh.
I forget what you call them, excursion trips.
Right.
Did different things, went to the shore and...
this was like one of the first couple of dates?
Yeah.
And was your father in agreement with that? I mean, did he...
yeah, my father liked him very much. You
So-
know, we had a farm at the time.
Right.
And he used to come down there Sunday nights and do the milking.
Oh, he
and,
did?
You know, my father loved that.
He was trying to get on your dad's good side.
Yeah.
So your dad didn't have any problem before you were married?
No.
He said you guys can go wherever you want?
No, I never had any problems with him.
Wow.
My father.
So he'd come over and milk the cows
Yeah.
to get on your dad's good side.
Yeah.
And then you started dating, and then how long after you were dating were you married?
Oh, well, we went together for quite a few years, I guess. I wasn't going to marry him till he had a good, steady job, see? So he had a good job with the government.
Right. Did he have a car?
Yeah, he had a car.
What kind? Do you remember what kind of car it was?
It was just a second-hand car.
Right.
I forget what it was. Wasn't much.
Right. Did your family have a car back then?
Yeah, my father had a Oldsmobile.
Wow.
My father had a good business. He built three four-family houses in Balm Brook. That's a little town down here.
Right.
You know, Balm Brook. And rented them, see?
Mm-hmm.
So we each have a house.
And was this one of the ones that he rented?
No, this house, this property belonged to his father.
Uh-huh.
No, this was Balm Brook.
Right.
And so I sold mine for $40,000.
Right.
And
did your mother like your like your husband?
Yeah, she
Or like
liked him a lot. Well, he was good to her too.
Right.
You know, when my father died, my mother lived with me for 13 years,
Mm-hmm.
and my husband was very good to her.
Yeah.
She had the best room in the house.
Mm-hmm.
She had this big room up here,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it was wonderful to have her here because I had little children.
Right. So, you married your after how long were you dating after you married your husband,
How long?
your boyfriend at the time?
Well, we went together for quite a few years. He gave me a ring right away,
He did?
but
With a big diamond in it?
it wasn't a big diamond, but it was a nice one.
Right.
And
Were you surprised that he asked you to marry you?
well, yeah, I was surprised.
How did he propose to you?
I don't remember
You don't?
not much of a proposal.
Right.
I don't remember what it was.
Uh-huh.
We just seemed to like each other. That was all. I didn't care for anybody else.
Right. And you stopped dating other people and you just dated.
I didn't date anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't either.
Did you go to movies back then? Did you go to?
Well, once in a while we used to go, but you didn't go as often.
Were they
They weren't as common as they are now.
right? Were they movies with sound or without?
Yeah,
They had sound back then, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
There wasn't too much to go to.
Right. And so he went into the. He was working for the government in the railroad.
Yeah. You see, he took this exam,
Right.
and they accepted him.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was on the railroad he was on the B&O for years.
Right.
Traveled from New York to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
He'd go down, he'd have 3 trips. He'd go down in the afternoon and come back in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and then he'd do that 3 different times,
Right.
and then he was home a week. That's the way they worked.
Right. So he would go out for a while and
Yeah,
then come
he'd be
back.
home for maybe a whole week.
What
And
did
that's
you?
when he did a lot of fruit business.
Right. What did you think of that?
Well, I liked it. He did a lot of work out here.
Didn't you miss him?
Yeah, I missed him. But I knew that's what his life was, so
Mm-hmm.
it was all right.
Now, did you work back then?
I never worked. My father didn't want me to work.
Right.
He said, I'll give you an allowance, and you stay home and help your mother.
So you when he was working on the railroad, you lived with your parents?
Yeah, we got married.
Uh-huh. And when did you guys get your own home?
Well, you see, I'll tell you, my grandmother was a widow, and she owned from the top of the hill,
Right.
as you come up the hill,
Sure.
to the top of this mountain.
Right.
All this land was hers, everything. And she had 12 children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something had to be done, and my father was the oldest of it. He was the executor.
Right.
So he said to me, he said, I was a saver, and he says, you have some money saved. If you're smart, you'll buy 4 acres here, because this is good land, and it's very cheap.
Mm-hmm.
See, property wasn't worth anything then,
Right.
at that time. So I bought the 4 acres. When he came back from the service, I had 2 acres of land ready to build.
Right.
See?
And so he went after he was working for the B&O.
Yeah, he was working. And they held his job, you see, and they raised him. When he came back, they gave him a raise.
Wow. So then he went over to the war, and then he came back and
Yeah.
got a raise.
Yeah.
And then you
He thought it was his duty to go.
right. And how long was he gone for?
He was gone a year and a half.
And you didn't see him for
No, I didn't see him
for a year and a half. Wow.
But he felt it was his duty, so I thought, well, if that's the way he felt, I should do it.
And that was the First World War?
That was First World War. You
Mhm.
see, and when he came back, things were in awful shape around here. There wasn't a decent road. There wasn't any electricity. And things were terrible.
Right.
And there's only one bank open in Bombrook.
And you said you used to go into New York City,
Yeah,
and
I
it was,
used to go in there. We had friends in there.
but you went in a long time ago, and there was still
Yeah,
dirt on the roads.
yeah, that's right.
And was there
But you
trains?
see, property, and my father used to say, he had a good imagination. He said, property here will be very valuable someday because it's so close to New York.
Right. He was right too.
He was right.
Yeah.
You see, and property it's very expensive here now.
Because everybody likes to live out here
Yeah.
and then commute into the city
So,
because it's so beautiful.
but my grandfather, I don't know how he managed. He didn't do anything. I don't remember him working at all.
Yeah.
But he owned all that land.
All the real estate.
But you see, my father had quarries. That's what he was, a builder.
Right.
And
He built churches.
built churches, and he was working with these quarries, and that's where he made his money.
Right. Building churches.
Building churches.
Busting
You
stone.
see, they used to build with stone as a rule.
In the good old days.
Yeah. Come in.
Hi. We're filming. Come on in.